And when I started my career back in October 1978, I remember the first day I worked at the state of Illinois Central Procurement Office. And I remember about 8:30 in the morning, you'd have a little click, 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 click. And within about 15 minutes, the whole office was cacophony of IBM Selected 2 and Selected 3 typewriters, typing purchase orders, bids, everything you could possibly think of. And then right around 5 minutes to 5, it would just sort of like taper off. And I would get phone calls to the day and answer them on my old black dial phone.
Everybody had a safe or a filing cabinet where they locked their bids up so nobody could get to them. And then you had a bid opening with two people from the agency, one to open the bids, the other to record it and act as a witness, because you never wanted to go to a public bid opening by yourself. People calling up and asking questions. One vendor calls up and asks a question. You don't just give him the answer. You have to write an addendum and then send it to everybody on your vendor list. Plus, we had the cover sheet of the solicitation on our bid board out in the lobby, out in the hall. And people would come in and say, "Oh, I could bid on that." And they'll come inside. We give them the whole copy. That way, they wouldn't steal the whole copy off the bid board. We just put the cover sheet on there.
And I remember very vividly one time one of our major vendors was just getting into the building just a few minutes before the threshold for the bid closing occurred. And I remember them running down the hall. We said, "Oh, we better at least open the door for them." So we opened the door to the office, and somebody just grabbed their document and just put it in the timestamp, and they made it just in time.
The word paper comes to mind. Paper here, paper there. We had a whole room full of lateral file cabinets stuffed with active archive files. It was like, don't lose that paper. And that went on forever. But something that really stood out was this thing called a fax machine. Now, it's not like Dragnet, like just the fax, ma'am. No, it was a communication device, of which at that time, it was amazing how we received electronic documents. And we thought it was the greatest thing until something else was invented. But the problem is when you had a deadline at 2:00 for your bids or proposals to come in, at 2:00, somebody would go to the fax machine and grab whatever was printed, whether it was still printing or not. And that's all that was allowed. What was happening in the background is all that stuff was being buffered with people calling at the last minute. And when we're done, there'd be 2 or 3 more bids or proposals. But because it didn't come in at the deadline, we could not accept it.
When I worked at the state of Illinois, we had to go down to the 7th floor to the telecommunications division of the Department of Central Management Services in order to use a fax machine. So we didn't get to take advantage of them right away. And when we did, we had to go down there and wait for somebody else to use it.
So it might have been like 1994. The city of San Diego came out and said they would not do business with a vendor who did not own a fax machine.
We ended up with an old DOS. It was brand new then, but a DOS procurement system called Informs, a company out of Alabama back in the day. And it was a DOS-based system, but it had everything you wanted in terms of being able to put in a few numbers and issue your bids. Now, that was the big deal back in 1983.
So it was DOS based, right? So everything looked very square. Everything was black and green. I don't know, it's clunky. Now it's way more efficient. It's funny, they had just gotten that when I went to work for the school district, but it did not take long for that ERP group to go out of business. So when I started, it was 1996. And I think the office had just gotten an ERP system maybe 6 months before I got there. So they were actually typing POs with typewriters. When I got there, it had changed like maybe 6 months prior, but we still had to physically print every single solicitation, go out and mail to all of the vendors that we wanted to get to receive them. Like I said, it was very manual. And then that's an addition, right? Like, especially since COVID, now everything is online with regards to how we receive offers, but we sent offers that way. And we didn't even have websites. for people to download them. They had to physically request a copy, come in, get a copy. We didn't even have emails. We had, now I'm dating myself. We had interoffice emails, but we did not communicate on the internet with our vendors. So everything was extremely manual back then.
When I first crossed paths with my first e-procurement system, we were using the system to put the solicitations out, but we were still taking our bids in as a hard bid and our solicitations, RFPs, the whole bit as a hard bid. So the only benefit that we were really getting from it was that it decreased some of our advertising requirements, because in the beginning, we would be putting our solicitations on our website, and we would have to be advertising in the newspaper and sending out emails and stuff to try and get people interested and get to come to the website so that they would see what solicitations were available.
Because of automation, things are in a more consistent format nowadays. You can let people know right away on your website what your general terms and conditions are. Saves the supplier a lot of time when they can look at what your general requirements are. They can look at your insurance requirements there. A lot of other things that are available now to them on a website that they had to read and read and read.
Market research was not as much of a thing. We weren't as robust and efficient with market research in the 90s as we are now, and even well into the 2000s as we are now. We literally had to rely on what our end users said, and we had to, make calls to vendors, rely on what we learned at trade shows, right? It was so important to attend events with our supplier communities just so that we could build those networks, because there was not such a thing as just going online and finding out whatever it is. All of that is made easier by the technology that we see right now. And it leaves more time for us to do the strategic work that we need to do rather than the manual work. And it helps us in forecasting and benchmarking, with being able to just draw data out of the computer than having to piece it all together, however we can figure out to save it.
Whereas now with the new e-procurement systems, all you have to do is create it on the system, and the system takes care of sharing that with all the suppliers that would be interested in it. So I think the crossover from when we started and we were only using it as an advertisement platform to now where you're using it not only to manage your solicitations, create your solicitations, receive all your responses, manage your contracts, manage your insurance, it's just night and day. There's so many ways you can communicate now that weren't available back then. They hadn't been thought of yet.
See, I better ask my AI that question, see what it tells me. Because a lot of things we can now find out that we had no idea about, that makes our life amazingly easier. But you still have to think. And so that hasn't changed. You still have to have good judgment, and you have to think about what you're doing, or else you're going to have trouble. AI is based on what's been put in before. And if it's not quality in the past, it's not going to be quality in the present and the future. But I would say that it is an amazing tool that just come about in the last 2 or 3 years. It's really come into focus. And it's the difference between night and day.
I'm just amazed when we do think back on how much time and effort we put into it, that I think from this generation now that never experienced those, they don't realize how technology has helped both the suppliers and the public procurement to do their jobs so much better.